So in previous videos, I went through the front of the car, fuel system, kind of the surge tank stuff, stereo. Went through a bit of the interior, kind of shared some electronic packages and things that I've done to make the car livable. But this is the fun part. I'm gonna break this section into two videos. One from down below, kind of showing all the nitty gritty under here, and then one above, because there's a lot you can't see from the top, and then from the bottom there's a lot you can't see either. So I'm gonna start here. First of all, yes, it's dirty. Why? Build's almost a year old now. Drive it a bunch. It's been driven in the rain. Got driven yesterday a bunch. So you know, it's the reality of a car. It's not a show queen. It's a driver, so it gets dirty. So don't give me too hard of a time. Slap to the front here. So I'm on a creeper. Sorry if it's loud. Talked about the accessory drive and how it's all packaged in here in a couple of videos, so I won't go too much into that. We'll work my way back here a little bit though. You see the part of the structure starting to appear. So this is a cross member that I designed here that holds the motor. See up there, the motor mount up in there. It goes across the car. You see the doubling of the bracing, and then down over there. Fairly lightweight design, and lots of room to pass wires and stuff. Like in this case, obviously you can see the water pump. One of the outlets goes through there, which I'll get into more on it. But if I zoom out, go into the structure a little bit more, you can see the whole subframe is all triangulated. Got a load path running here to here. This is the toe link mount, lower control arm mount, same thing on their side. And then a lower control arm mount ties into this here. You see it's all triangulated through. So all those loads run up through into the chassis, kind of in this original mounting spot. You can see I've tied it in here. There's a 3/8 tab that's been welded to the chassis. Kind of hard to see. There we go. 3/8 tab welded to the chassis with a backer plate like you do a roll cage. So that's a secondary double shear mount there. I've got the factory mount here. And then also have this little guy. It's kind of weird looking plate. It's kind of half-assed, but what it does is it makes this whole joint double shear. The factory just has this bolt going to the chassis, which is fine, but I have a lot more load going through it. So this basically allows me to run, this is a double shear joint, which loads this frame rail a lot better. And this isn't perfectly flush to this. You can kind of see this actually a little bend in it. This is a fairly thin plate, but that allows the flexibility. I literally just tighten the bolt down and it kind of crunches it all together. So a really tight joint between that bolt up here and then this, not going anywhere. Also, you'll notice the engine is low as possibly can be. This X, you can see, I mean, it's like an 1/8 inch from the motor plate. I've actually machined, see there, I've machined actually the oil pan so that it's flush with the trans to motor plate, and the oil pan actually drops down below, but actually this is still slightly above, about 1/16 above this. So motor's low as you can get, center of gravity, all about that. Get anything as low as possible. Because of that, the oil filter would have stuck out the bottom of the car, so it's remote mounted just right in front, which makes the oil cooler and the turbo oiling system stuff easier to plumb anyway, so not too big of a deal. With that said, you can start to see the oil system plumbing. So this is a return. Basically the oil goes up through this little housing here and up to an oil cooler. That's an air to water heat exchanger up in there, covered by the plastic piece, but runs back in and then back into the block. This is part of the turbo oiling system. There's a check valve to keep the oil in the turbos and keep them from draining back after the car shut off and draining into the turbos, siphoning, I guess you'd call it, into the turbos and causing smoke on startup. So that's kind of pressure side oiling. You see the cooling system a bit here. This is a same pump you'd find on like a Baja 1000, like a trophy truck, designed to cool 800 plus horsepower, wide open for hours. It's got dual 1-inch outlets, single 1.5 inch inlet. So those two outlets, unfortunately you can't see because it's all on the front of the motor, but basically one side goes to one side of where the factory water pump was, and the other one goes to the other side where the factory water pump was. So there's actually no factory water pump or anything up there. It's just aluminum tubes that are fabricated on a header that runs to the front of the block. It allows me to run that big ass water pump, keep this thing cool. So if I want to track it or just drive like an asshole, I can do that and not worry about you know, any kind of thermal challenges, big radiators, etc., as you've seen in the previous videos. Let's see what else going along on this left side of the car. So turbo drains, the turbos are super low. This is on purpose. I know a lot of guys like to show off the turbos and put them on the top, make them look all cool, but turbos are extremely heavy. And last thing I want to do is put weight up high. To make the car handle well, you want all the way as low into the center of the car as possible. The turbos are fairly far forward in front of the center line of the wheels, and they're as low as possible. I mean, you can see there's not much clearance here, and the other side's even lower. The turbo actually drops down below the frame, and the reason why it's not symmetrical is the turbos are identical. They're not opposing, so basically it's a scroll. So they're not mirror images of each other, which causes it to look different left to right, but pretty freaking low. So in order to manage the oil flow, turbos generally have to gravity drain or they will smoke. So I made this little basically vertical drop down here. You can see where it's all welded together. And then I have a really small oil pump that basically constantly is pumping oil out of the turbos and into the dry sump tank. And it's like a scavenge pump, basically, electric one. And then of course, the engine is dry sump as well, so it's got a little scavenge, the main scavenge there, and it's just done with the factory LS3 dry sump. No crazy daily system or anything like that. That wasn't worth the money. I don't expect to really track this car much of it all. I mean, it's really supposed to be a driver. Saved a ton of money in packaging room not going with that, and the factory system works pretty damn well for anything than like a really extreme race car. So mirror image brakes on this side are the same type of setup. A bit easier to see the air filter on this side. It's got a sock on it to prevent debris. Being down on the bottom of the car, you pick up all that road debris on the highway, so that keeps all that crap from sticking between the pleats of the air filter. And then kind of into the turbo here, same kind of setup with the oil pump on this side. Instead of going farther back, maybe I'll just kind of cruise into the hub upright assembly. So I got these sweet billet parts from SBL, really stiff, fully adjustable with a quick turn here, which makes life really nice. These are custom 300M axles on a 930 CV, so the CV is way bigger than the factory. The original uprights I had to machine a ton of material out, actually cut through in some places, so went ahead and machined these out of billet, these uprights. So I've got room for the upright, for the CV, which you can see is still pretty tight. I've also, you can see, I've got the factory ball joint's actually somewhere up here. So I've got a roll center correction, basically drop this down. When you lower the car, it screws up the geometry of the suspension. You've probably seen roll center correction kits, basically spaces this down. Well, I'm not even spaced all the way down. I'm about a full inch lower than the factory ball joint. So tons of adjustment here. Same thing on the toe link. You can see I've got a ton of adjustment here. This is for bump steer. I got this dialed in. The car has almost no bump steer, which is fantastic. Also shown here, you got the Ohlin's shocks. These are custom valve for me with a custom spring rate for the weight of the motor and everything, which is only, I don't know, adds like a couple percent to the rear, but wanted to get that right. And then electronic e-brake system. The cabling was gonna be a mess with the way the motor accessory drive is. So when I designed these uprights, I decided to go to Willwood electric e-brake system, which has worked fantastic for now. Let's see what else going on. Let's slide back a little bit here. This is a Lamborghini Gallardo 6-speed manual gearbox. It's got a billet center plate from Dallas Performance, as you can see right there, the DP. Rest in peace, Taylor Sims. He was definitely a help in building this car. I bounced a lot of ideas off him, and it's a shame that he never got to see it finished. So this got drop gears in it, also billet drop gears to re-gear the gearbox to match the power range or the RPM range of the motor. A V10 out of Lamborghini, much higher RPM range than a V8. I wanted this thing to just cruise down the highway, keep the revs as low as possible, good fuel mileage, and just not annoying, honestly. I don't want a thing turning 3,000 RPM when I'm going 80, just obnoxious. So this is re-geared to be very similar to a Z06 Corvette, but obviously, as you know from the interior shot, it is a gated 6-speed. It's got a trans cooler on it. You can see the line here, runs around to a little cooler over here. It's got fans controlled by the Motec, so it turns on and off when the trans temperature reaches a certain point. And then got a remote drain for the tank for the oil. Makes it super easy to do an oil change. Pop that dude off and the oil comes right out. You can kind of get a picture for the exhaust here. It's pretty simple. Got a big X right here to basically damp the sound of the left-hand side of the engine. It smooths out. It sounds less like a farm truck and more high-end, I guess, the best way to describe it. There's a little X back there. Believe it or not, these are about the biggest mufflers I could find that would fit. They're definitely not big. And they look like there's a lot of room, but there's just nothing that really fit in the space well. So eventually I want to make a custom muffler that takes all that space up and will really quiet this thing down. Not that it's super loud, but I like my cars pretty quiet. I like to drive them around town and enjoy them, and loud cars get annoying. This is definitely not annoying, but it's, I wouldn't mind it, wouldn't mind it quieter. much like the front, I've got toe hooks built in, makes it super easy to strap the car on the dyno or put it on a trailer. Factory anti-roll bar fits and all that stuff. I tried to keep, you know, this thing as kind of reasonable and factory as possible, where there was enough stuff to custom design. The last thing I need to do is make something more complicated, you know, than it needed to be. You can start to see the structure down here that holds the gearbox. You know, obviously all this is custom. Rear cross member of the gearbox, this drops down, this braces it laterally. And I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there's another, oh yeah, right there. See that guy? That's another 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, I think, diameter tube that runs forward to the main cross member, which you'll see on from the top, that braces. So if one, obviously, is on the brakes, car decelerates, the engine wants to go forward, keeps it from doing that, of course, but also it in the event of a rear impact, I had the gearbox as far forward as possible to give me, you know, crush room between this bumper, the bumper support and the gearbox. But should I get hit hard enough, you know, I don't want the engine going through the interior of the car, so that helps brace to limit the gearbox movement. And then also, kind of tough to see, but you can see it a little bit. If you see that guy right there, that's another brace that runs forward to the engine mount. There's one on both sides. You can see this brace right here. It runs up to this mount, goes back to the chassis, back over here, double shear. That also holds the motor from going forward. So I've kind of gone overboard. So if the cars get hit, the motor won't go forward. And also these angle so that if the motor does go forward, this wants to go downward. So if you get hit in the back and the engine wants to start moving forward, it wants to swing down as those come into tension. And you know, I'm not going to do so much, but anything I can do to make the car a little bit safer and a little bit smarter. You know, it's what, $5 for the steel and, you know, a couple hours of time, why not do it? So I've done all of that to help prevent, if the car does get hit in the rear, you know, from anything nasty happening. You can see the air box, the heat exchanger. It'll make more sense from the top, but this is where the heat exchanger for the intercooler sits, inside that insulated box. And air drives down through the top of the car, through the heat exchanger, out the back bumper. And you can see that in several of the videos, but you can see the screens across there. That's where all that hot air comes out of. Breather for the a breather for the breather tank for the crankcase. Put this down here. Any motor with big ring gaps and stuff that makes this kind of power tends to smoke a little bit out of the breather. So I put it down here. Again, street car. I don't want to see smoke in the engine bay, even a tiny bit. So I put it down here so you don't notice the tiny bit of smoke that does come out of it, because it's always kind of blending with the exhaust and you don't really catch on to it. So moving over to the left side, you can also see the brace that runs up to the engine mount, maybe a little clearer on this side, right there. Lots of hoses and stuff, but there's that guy as well. Lots of small details of triangulation and bracing to make sure this thing is going to be safe and strong, and I could beat it on it. And so far I've been beating on it and haven't had any problems. Luckily, all this stuff's been pretty solid and reliable. Said the dirt proves I've been driving, and I assure you I did not put it together this dirty. But so I think that's it for down here. I will do another video showing the top side here shortly. Thank you very much for checking it out.